謹んで六章しいたてまつる仏説まかはんやはらみか信条観二大菩薩行事はんやはらみか実証剣門開空の一切空楽者利
What are ideas? Where are ideas? In the modern world, we're used to considering ideas either as contained somehow by our minds. So we say, I had a bad idea. I had a good idea. I have many ideas. They're in my head, they're in my mind, the ideas. Of course, ideas come and go. What a brilliant idea, what an old idea. They come and go. They are very fleeting, shall we say. Certainly not eternal. They're good ideas, bad ideas. And then we look at ideas as being somehow produced by our environment. Thus we say that what we think is the product of our environment. That our thought, as we say today, is historically relative. It's an expression of our times, perhaps, if not of history as a whole. Be that as it may, ideas are then somehow in our heads and produced by our environment. So somehow they're in the environment in one sense or another. For how can the environment produce these ideas that are in our head? Well, of course, we have an old Kantian answer to that, which is to say that we have a certain conceptual structure, apparatus, psychic apparatus that receives the world and produces these ideas as a result. So ideas are responses to our environment. Ideas. Do ideas have a dimension? Do they have space? Perhaps they are simply illusions that we generate as dreams in response to a world we do not understand, or rather in response to all that is obscure to us. But ideas resist reduction to our environment. They also resist reduction to our psychic apparatus. Why? Well, for one thing, we come to understand ideas. That is to say, that we fail to grasp ideas. If we made ideas, if we produced the ideas, then we could possess them, we could make them our own. What is more, each one of us would have an idea at every given moment, and that idea would vanish, and we would have another idea relatively to the world that affects us. But it is not clear that what affects us is simply some kind of material without ideas, a mindless material. Perhaps ideas are reflected in our minds. but whence? What is it that prompts us to have ideas, to awaken to ideas? Is there an apparatus in our heads that produces ideas, a little factory that makes ideas, that makes what is not tangible, what has no space, that returns, or that never leaves, somehow, that is always there? Do we create ideas or do we awaken to ideas? Are ideas simply produced by us, or are they already in the world? Or does the world arise in the context of ideas? Well, let us explore for a minute this latter alternative, which is the classical alternative. We could also call it a Platonic alternative. And what does the Platonist of old tell us? Well, Platonists, we know, teach us that ideas are eternal. And in the Middle Ages, we have reports about Plato. According to these reports, Plato taught, and this in the Timaeus, that ideas are eternal, or eternal forms, that are on their own, and then there comes an agent, a demiurge. This agent looks at the ideas, and on the basis of the ideas, shapes our empirical visible world. So our world is created by an external agent, the demiurge, an artist, and this artist looks at the ideas just as, we might say, a human artist can look at nature and then produces as a result the work of art. Nature is here understood to be something eminently intelligible, the ideas. But then in the Middle Ages, scholars were weary of this view for a number of reasons. Now, the question was, where are those ideas? Where are they? And the answer was, in the mind of God, of course. Of course, in the mind of God. So there is no God, demiurgic God outside of the ideas. Likewise, the ideas are not outside of God. Now, this teaching is not new. It is not the prerogative of the Middle Ages. Indeed, in Plato's Republic, we hear of the idea of ideas, or the idea of the good. And this idea of the good, visualized as a sun, shining sun, is, we could say, the father of all ideas. The idea of the good, or the idea of ideas. Now, idea is also form, eidos, in Plato. So it is that which gives an identity to what we would call, well, the correlative of form is matter, the content. So things have a content and a form. And the form of all forms is the form that contains all the forms. The idea of all the ideas is the cradle of all the ideas, or the father of all the ideas. Now, the ideas are eternal, which is to say, they are divine, and divine beings, indeed. They're not mere forms, for they include being eternal. The matter, the content, that for us is external to forms. We abstract them in our experience. The forms from the content. And the form becomes nominal. I don't eat the word, the name, or the concept, apple. I eat the apple that I can touch, the tangible one. And yet, what I experience is clearly informed, has a form. Now that form changes all the time. It is a kind of morphe, an external form. But it presupposes a hidden form, and ultimately the idea of the apple, the idea of the table. So the artist looks at the ideas of nature. Nature is understood in terms of intelligible things, that is, as to say, ideas. Now, these ideas all share a kind of paternity. That is to say, they all come out of the same idea. This is, in a few words, the Platonic, classical Platonic lesson about the ideas. You say, well, does that mean that Plato teaches that there is a God and he has various ideas? Well, to some extent, yes. But if we consider things further, then we see that God as idea, or the idea of the good, is not merely one idea among others. In other words, there's idea of a distinct order. We could say that the idea of ideas is the being of beings, to some extent, echoing a 20th century philosopher. And in this sense, he is that which makes every idea what it is. The form of all forms. What is a form in itself? What is the essence of the form? Or the truth about all of the ideas? What is the truth of the ideas? When you speak of truth, well, in Greek we have aletheia. Aletheia is the unconcealment, something that shows itself, is present, the presence, right, of the idea. But aletheia is also at once a kind of concealment. For nature, as we sense it, we're familiar with this, hides by showing itself. And ideas seem to be evident. Very often, they seem to be self-evident. And yet, when we ask questions about what we mean, what they mean, what the ideas mean, what they conceal, what their content, the content, and thus the resolution between the content and the form is hidden. Somehow it's hidden. Or they hide their content by showing themselves. The form, by its own nature, shows itself. And in showing itself, it is form. But in showing itself, it protects as a womb, it enshrines a content. That content is itself the hidden dimension of the form, not something fundamentally other than the form. So we could say that there is a dialectic of showing and concealing. The truth is itself that dialectic. So all ideas, we could say, stand in their own truth, which is to say the idea of all the ideas. But why does Plato speak about the idea of the good? What is the good? The good is what is desired, the object of desire. But the object of desire could be just about anything, right? We say in vulgar terms, I desire an apple, I desire this and that. But for Plato, of course, this is a vulgar sense of desire. What we really desire is the perfection of the object of desire. And only in that perfection can desire be truly at home as the content of that form. Desire is that which is enshrined, concealed, protected, saved by its proper form, the perfection of all of the forms of desire. So, in speaking of the idea of the good, Plato is tying the content of our experience, of ourselves, to its proper form. That form is the perfection of all possible forms. And perhaps we should leave it at that for now.